The moment I pried the panel loose, I heard breathing. Not the hum of pipes or the rattle of the furnace. Human breathing. Shallow, weak, barely there. I stepped through the gap in the wall and found a concrete room hidden beneath my own home. Lying on a thin mattress in the far corner, skeletal and trembling, was Jake, my son. The boy I had buried in my heart 9 months ago. He looked up at me and whispered, "Don't let her know you found me. Thank you for being here." Before we continue, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below, telling me where you are watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. A quick note before we begin. This is a fictional narrative with dramatized elements created for storytelling and educational purposes. Any similarities to real people or events are purely coincidental, though the message behind the story is meaningful. Now, let me tell you how I ended up standing in that room. I build houses for a living. Brooks Construction started as a 2-man crew working out of a rented garage in Lakewood. My father taught me the trade before I was old enough to drive. By the time I was 30, I had turned that garage operation into the 3rd largest construction firm in Colorado. Luxury condominiums, mountain retreats, high-end residential. I knew materials. I knew load-bearing walls. I knew how a foundation settles in Colorado clay. I knew houses, the way some people know music, by feel, by instinct, by the sound a structure makes when something is wrong. So you would think I would have noticed a room built underneath my own home. That December afternoon started quietly. The sky over Denver was a hard, pale gray. A thin layer of snow had settled across Cherry Creek overnight. Our house sat near the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. 5 bedrooms, 3 stories. A wraparound porch that Megan had insisted on when we built it 14 years earlier. Megan, my first wife. She had been gone almost 4 years. Liver failure, or so I had been told. I had come home early because a meeting in Lodo was canceled. Sophie, my second wife, was supposed to be at a client consultation until 5. The house was quiet. Just the low hum of the heating system and the faint ticking of the hallway clock Megan had picked out years ago. I needed a contract from 2012 stored in the basement. I pulled the cord for the overhead light and went down. The shelving unit stood where it always had, pressed against the back wall. As I pulled a box forward, my elbow bumped the edge of the shelf. The entire structure shifted, maybe half an inch. But metal shelving bolted to concrete should not move like that. I looked at the wall behind the unit. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then, I noticed it. A thin vertical seam running floor to ceiling, 3 feet from the corner. Almost invisible. Not a crack. A cut. Deliberate and precise. I pulled the shelving unit away from the wall. Behind it was a wooden panel, roughly 4 feet wide, fitted so perfectly it looked like part of the original construction. But it was not. I had poured this foundation myself. This panel was installed after the house was built. My fingers found the edge. I pried it loose. The air that hit my face was cold, stale, heavy with a stillness that only exists in spaces sealed off from the world. Behind the panel was a short, steep staircase descending into darkness. A faint glow came from below. I went down. The room was small, maybe 10 feet by 12. Foam panels lined the walls. Soundproofing. The realization twisted in my stomach. A narrow bed sat against the far wall. Beside it, a folding table holding a plastic water bottle and protein bars still in their wrappers. A mini refrigerator hummed in the corner. A narrow door was set into the opposite wall, and mounted high in the far corner, angled to cover the entire room, was a security camera. A red light blinked steadily. Someone had built this room with care, with precision, with the kind of knowledge that comes from years of construction experience. Then I saw him. A shape beneath a thin gray blanket. A body curled on the mattress. Impossibly thin. The kind of thin that does not happen in weeks. It happens over months. My legs stopped working. My lungs forgot how to breathe. Because even before he turned over, even before I saw his face, I knew. Jake. My voice cracked like something breaking. He rolled onto his back slowly. His eyes opened, squinting against even the dim light. Then they found me. They widened. Not with relief, with terror. Dad. Barely a whisper. His lips were cracked. His cheekbones pressed sharply against translucent skin. Dark circles hollowed out the space beneath his eyes. His hair had grown long and tangled. He looked like a faded photograph of someone I used to know. I crossed the room and dropped to my knees beside the bed. I reached for him. He flinched. A small, instinctive movement backward. The kind of flinch that comes from months of expecting harm instead of comfort. That gesture nearly destroyed me. Then recognition settled into his face. His eyes softened. His lips trembled. He collapsed forward into my arms. I held him so tightly I could feel every rib pressing against my chest. He weighed nothing. 9 months had stripped him to bone and fear. His body shook with sobs. My own tears came without permission. "You're here," he kept whispering. "You're really here." "I'm here," I said. "I've got you, son." For a long time, neither of us moved. The camera blinked red above us. The LED light hummed. Somewhere beyond the concrete walls, the furnace kicked on, a muffled sound from a world that felt very far away. When Jake finally pulled back, something harder had replaced the terror in his eyes. Something forged over 9 months alone in the dark. "How did you find me?" he asked. "The shelf moved," I said. Behind the panel there was a staircase. "Jake, who did this?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said 2 words that rearranged every molecule of air in that room. "Sophie did. My wife. The woman sleeping beside me every night. The woman handing me a smoothie every morning with a kiss on the forehead. She's not alone, Dad." Jake's voice dropped lower. His eyes flickered toward the camera in the corner. "There's a man. He comes with her sometimes. He built this room." Jake's voice was barely louder than the hum of the refrigerator in the corner, but every word hit like a hammer against glass. "She invited me to talk," he said. His eyes stayed fixed on the camera above us, watching the red light blink. "Back in March, she said she wanted us to get closer. She made lemonade." A bitter sound escaped his throat. Something too hollow to be a laugh. "I woke up down here. 9 months. My son had been 10 feet below the kitchen floor for 9 months. While I ate breakfast above him. While I watched television above him. While I slept beside the woman who had locked him in a concrete box and sealed the wall shut behind her. She comes every week," Jake continued. His fingers gripped the edge of the blanket. "Brings food. Checks the camera. She told me no one would ever find me down here." He swallowed hard. "She said eventually people would stop looking, that the police already had." I wanted to ask more. I wanted to understand how this was possible. How a room could exist beneath my own foundation, without my knowledge. How the woman I married could carry groceries down a hidden staircase every week while I sat upstairs believing my son was dead. But then I heard it. The sound came from above. Faint, but unmistakable. The low growl of a car engine pulling into the driveway. Tires crunching over thin snow. Then silence as the engine cut off. Jake heard it too. His entire body went rigid. The color drained from his face so quickly, it was as though someone had pulled a plug. "That's her," he whispered. "She's early." A car door slammed shut. Then another sound, the sharp click of heels crossing the driveway toward the front door. Each step echoed through the walls of the house above us like a countdown. I grabbed Jake's arm. "Can you walk?" He nodded, but his eyes said something different. He swung his legs off the bed and tried to stand. His knees buckled immediately. I caught him before he hit the floor. He weighed almost nothing. His arm over my shoulder felt like holding a child. "The basement has a utility door," I said quietly. "East wall. It opens to the backyard." We moved toward the staircase. Jake leaned heavily against me, each step costing him visible effort. His bare feet scraped softly against the concrete. Above us, the front door opened. I heard Sophie's voice, muffled through the floor, calling out casually. "Nathan? Are you home?" My car was in the driveway. She knew I was here. We reached the top of the hidden staircase and stepped back into the main basement. I eased Jake past the shelving unit. I thought about pushing it back into place, hiding the gap, buying time. But there was no time. Sophie's footsteps were already crossing the hardwood floor above us, moving through the living room, toward the kitchen, toward the basement door. The utility exit was on the far side of the basement, behind the water heater. A narrow metal door that opened onto a short concrete stairwell leading up to the backyard. Maintenance crews used it once a year to service the furnace. I had not opened it in months. I guided Jake across the basement floor as quickly as his legs would allow. His breathing was ragged, shallow. Every few steps his body sagged against mine, and I had to adjust my grip to keep him upright. The overhead light was still on. If Sophie opened the basement door and looked down the stairs, she would see us immediately. We reached the utility door. I gripped the handle and pushed. It resisted. Cold air had sealed the rubber gasket around the frame. I pushed harder. The door gave way with a low groan that sounded impossibly loud in the silence. Cold December air rushed in. Gray sky. Thin snow on the ground. The backyard stretched before us, flat and exposed. The wooden fence at the property line was 6 feet tall. Beyond it was the narrow service alley where I sometimes parked my truck when the driveway was full. Behind us, inside the house, I heard a door open. The basement door. Then Sophie's voice drifted down the stairwell, casual, warm. "Nathan? You down there, honey?" My blood turned to ice. I pulled Jake through the utility door and up the concrete steps into the yard. The cold hit his bare arms instantly. He shivered violently, but did not make a sound. 9 months in captivity had taught him how to be silent. We crossed the yard in the open, no cover. If Sophie looked out the kitchen window, she would see us. Every step felt like walking through water. Jake's legs trembled beneath him. Twice he stumbled. Twice I caught him. The fence was 20 feet away. 15. 10. I reached the fence and turned to Jake. "I'm going to lift you over. Hold the top rail." He gripped the wooden rail with both hands. His fingers were pale and thin, knuckles white against the grain. I grabbed his waist and pushed him upward. He pulled himself over with more strength than I expected, fueled by something beyond physical ability. Fear. Survival. 9 months of waiting for exactly this moment. I climbed over after him. The alley was empty. My truck was parked 40 feet away, tucked between 2 garbage bins. I half-carried Jake to the passenger side, opened the back door, and helped him onto the seat. He lay down immediately, pulling his knees to his chest. I grabbed my coat from the front seat and draped it over him. "Stay down," I whispered. "Don't let anyone see you." He pulled the coat over his head without a word. I got behind the wheel. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 attempts to start the engine. The truck rumbled to life. I forced myself to drive slowly out of the alley. Normal speed. Normal behavior. A man leaving his neighborhood on a December afternoon. Nothing unusual. The rearview mirror showed the alley behind us. Empty. No one following. No car pulling out. I turned onto East First Avenue and merged into traffic. Denver moved around us the way it always did. Indifferent. Ordinary. A city going about its business, while my world burned silently inside this truck. 3 blocks later, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. From the back seat, Jake's voice came through the coat, muffled but steady. "Dad, there's something else." I glanced in the mirror. I could see the shape of him beneath the dark fabric, curled small. Before she took me, I found files in the basement, behind the archive boxes. He paused. "About Aspen Ridge." My hands tightened around the steering wheel until the leather creaked. That's why she did this, Dad. I was reading them when she walked in. She saw what I found. His voice dropped lower. And the next day, she made the lemonade. I drove south through Denver without a destination for the first 3 minutes. My hands gripped the steering wheel while my mind sorted through every person I knew, dividing them into 2 lists. People I trusted and people I was no longer sure about. The first list had one name on it. Ben Callahan lived in a craftsman-style house on a tree-lined street in Wash Park. We had been friends since freshman year at Colorado State. He became a lawyer. I became a builder. Over 26 years, he had handled every contract, every dispute, every piece of legal paperwork Brooks Construction had ever produced. He knew things about me that no one else did. I pulled into his driveway at 5:10. The windows glowed warm against the December sky. I sent a single text. Emergency. Open the door. I have Jake. 8 seconds later, Ben was on the front porch. Flannel shirt, reading glasses on his forehead. Then he saw me open the back door and help a thin, trembling figure climb out from beneath my coat. The color left his face entirely. My God, he whispered. Jake. Margaret appeared behind him. Her hand flew to her mouth. Between the 3 of us, we guided Jake inside and onto the living room couch. Margaret returned moments later with a blanket, water, and soup. Jake accepted the water with hands that shook so badly the glass rattled against his teeth. He drank slowly, carefully, as though he had learned that drinking too fast made him sick. Ben sat across from us. His face shifted from shock into something harder. The lawyer had arrived. Nathan, tell me everything, I told him. The canceled meeting. The shelf that moved. The panel. The staircase. The room. Jake. The camera. Sophie. Ben's face darkened with every sentence. We need to call the police, he said. Right now. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. If we call now, Sophie will know within hours. She has a camera in that room. The moment she sees Jake is gone, she destroys everything. The room, the footage, the evidence. By the time investigators get a warrant, there will be nothing left. Ben opened his mouth to argue. Then his eyes moved to Jake on the couch. She came every Thursday, Jake said quietly. We all turned toward him. Same time, food in a cooler bag. Enough for exactly 7 days. His voice was flat, mechanical, as though he had rehearsed these words for months, waiting for someone to hear them. 274 days. I counted every one. Margaret squeezed his shoulder. Her eyes glistened. She told me things. Jake continued, staring at the floor. She said the police had given up, that Dad had accepted I was gone. Something crossed his face. She said I should get comfortable because no one was coming. The rage that built inside my chest was too large for sound. Sophie, standing in that room every Thursday, delivering food to my son like feeding an animal, while I sat upstairs trusting her. There's more, Jake said. He looked at me with something complicated in his eyes. Not just fear. Something like hesitation. Before she took me, I went to the basement looking for my drafting tools. Behind the archive boxes, there was a file box labeled Aspen Ridge 2012. The room temperature dropped. I opened it. Jake continued. Contracts, inspection reports, material orders. The concrete specs did not match building codes. The rebar spacing was wider than standard. There were invoices from a supplier priced 30% below market. His eyes searched my face. Dad. Something was wrong with that project. Silence. The kind that makes the air heavier. Ben was looking at me. I could feel it without turning. He knew about Aspen Ridge. He had always known. He drafted the settlement agreements when cracks appeared in the building 2 years later. He made sure the paperwork was airtight and the complaints buried before they reached the press. We had never spoken about it directly. Not once in 12 years. It existed between us like a fault line beneath a city. Present. Silent. Waiting. I was reading the files when Sophie came downstairs, Jake said. She was watching me from the bottom of the stairs. I did not hear her. He swallowed. Her face changed. Like watching someone remove a mask. He looked at his hands. The next day she asked me to sit and talk. She brought lemonade. After that, I woke up in the dark. The room stayed quiet for a long time. Margaret held Jake close. Ben stared at the floor. I stared at my hands, the hands that had built a company on shortcuts and silence. Nathan, Ben said carefully. What do you want to do? I want to find out who she really is, I said. I want to know why she did this. And I want to make sure she can never do it again. Ben studied me. Then he stood, walked to his desk, and opened the top drawer. He pulled out a business card. Rosa Gutierrez, he said. Private investigator. Former ATF special agent. A careful pause. She specializes in fraud. Specifically, construction fraud. The words landed like a blade turned sideways. He handed me the card. I took it. The paper felt heavier than it should have. She is the best, Nathan, Ben said quietly. And she does not judge. She just finds the truth. The truth. I turned the card between my fingers. That was exactly what terrified me. Because the truth would not stop at Sophie. It would keep digging until it reached Aspen Ridge. Until it reached the decisions I made 12 years ago. Until it reached the man I destroyed to protect my profits. The truth would find me standing right beside Sophie, on the wrong side of the line. I called the number on the card that same evening from Ben's guest bathroom, with the door locked and the faucet running. Rosa Gutierrez answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm, unhurried, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who had spent years listening to people describe the worst moments of their lives. We met the following morning at a coffee shop in the Reno district, River North Art District, sat on the edge of downtown Denver. A neighborhood of converted warehouses and spray-painted murals, where artists and tech startups shared sidewalks with construction crews. The shop Rosa chose was small and quiet, tucked between a tattoo parlor and a gallery selling bronze sculptures of elk. She was already seated when I arrived. Mid-40s. Dark hair pulled back in a clean knot. Sharp brown eyes that assessed me the moment I walked through the door. She wore a plain black jacket over a gray sweater. No jewelry except a simple watch. Everything about her was deliberate and efficient, as though she had spent years eliminating anything unnecessary from her life. Mr. Brooks, she said. Not a question. I sat down across from her. She had a laptop open beside a small leather notebook. A cup of black coffee sat untouched near her elbow. Ben Callahan says you need help with a sensitive situation, she said. He also says I should hear it directly from you. I told her everything. From the beginning. The basement, the panel, the staircase, the concrete room. Jake on the mattress, 9 months gone. Sophie's weekly visits. The camera, the man who built the room. Jake's discovery of the Aspen Ridge files. The lemonade. I spoke for nearly 20 minutes without stopping. Rosa did not interrupt once. Her pen moved steadily across the notebook. Quick, precise strokes. Her face remained neutral throughout, the expression of someone trained to absorb terrible information without flinching. When I finished, the coffee shop had emptied around us. Morning light slanted through the windows and caught the dust in the air. Rosa closed her notebook. She looked at me for a moment before speaking. Mr. Brooks, she said, I need to ask you some questions that may feel intrusive, but they are necessary. Ask whatever you need. When did you marry Sophie? June 2021. I said. 3.5 years ago. How did you meet? A real estate networking event at the Denver Art Museum. Spring of 2020. I paused, pulling the memory forward. She was representing an interior design firm. Hale Design Studio. We talked about architecture, about mountain homes, about how spaces influence the way people feel. I exhaled. She was intelligent, charming. She seemed to understand my work in a way most people do not. Rosa wrote something down. Did you ever visit her office? The studio? My stomach tightened. No. She said she preferred meeting clients at their locations. More personal, she said. Employees? Business partners? She mentioned an assistant once. And a contractor she worked with occasionally. I frowned. I never met either of them. Family? She told me her parents died in a car accident when she was 19. No siblings. Rosa looked up from her notebook. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not pity. Recognition. As though she had heard this exact pattern before. Friends from before she moved to Denver? I opened my mouth. Then I stopped. For a long, uncomfortable moment, I searched my memory and found almost nothing. A few names mentioned casually over dinner. An old roommate in Tucson she never called. A college friend she had lost touch with. Not really, I said quietly. She said she had been focused on building her business. Rosa turned to her laptop. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. I watched her pull up databases and search tools I did not recognize. Sophie Hale, she murmured as she typed. A minute passed. Then another. The silence stretched between us, like a wire pulled tight. Mr. Brooks, Rosa said finally. She turned the laptop toward me. The screen showed a search results page. Empty. There is no record of anyone named Sophie Hale in any federal, state, or commercial database prior to March 2017. I stared at the screen. No birth certificate. No social security record before that date. No driver's license history. No tax filings. No credit history. She tapped the keyboard again. A website appeared. Hale Design Studio. Elegant layout. Beautiful photographs of luxury interiors, client testimonials, a portfolio page showcasing high-end residential projects. It looked completely legitimate. This website, Rosa said, was registered on February 2nd, 2020. 6 weeks before you met Sophie at that networking event. She clicked on the portfolio page. These photographs are stock images purchased from 3 different design magazines. The client testimonials reference names that do not correspond to any real person in the Denver metro area. She turned the laptop back toward herself. Hale Design Studio has no registered business address. The phone number routes to a prepaid voicemail service. There are no employees on record, no contractor licenses, no insurance filings. The coffee shop felt smaller. The air felt thinner. Mr. Brooks, Rosa said carefully. I do not believe your wife is an interior designer. I do not believe Sophie Hale existed before 2017. She paused. This identity was constructed from scratch, carefully, professionally, over a period of years. Someone built this woman the way you build a house. Foundation first, then walls, then the surface that makes everything look normal. I sat there trying to absorb what she was telling me. I had married a ghost, a fabrication, a person assembled from fake documents and stock photographs whose entire existence had been engineered for one purpose, to enter my life. Who does something like that? I asked. My voice sounded far away. Someone with a specific target, Rosa said. And a very long memory. She closed the laptop partially and leaned forward. Her eyes held mine with a directness that left no room for evasion. Mr. Brooks, before we go any further, I need to ask you something else. Her tone shifted slightly. Have you been experiencing memory problems recently? Confusion? Difficulty concentrating? Forgetting appointments or names you should know? The question hit me like a cold hand pressed against the back of my neck. I had not mentioned any of that. Not to Rosa. Not even to Ben. The memory issues had started roughly 5 months ago. Small things at first. Misplacing my car keys. Blanking on the name of a subcontractor I had worked with for a decade. Forgetting meetings I had scheduled myself. I had blamed it on stress, on grief, on the weight of running the company while Jake was missing. How did you know? I asked. Rosa studied me for a moment. Something hardened in her expression. Not surprise. Confirmation. Because that is usually the next phase, she said quietly. The isolation comes first. Remove the people closest to the target. Then the incapacitation. Make the target appear mentally unfit. She folded her hands on the table. Mr. Brooks, I have seen this pattern before. And if I am right about what is happening to you, then your wife is not just hiding your son. She paused. She is dismantling you. Piece by piece. And she has been doing it for months. The next morning I sat at the kitchen island and watched Sophie place a glass of green smoothie in front of me. Spinach, banana, blueberry, a scoop of protein powder. The same recipe she had been making every morning for the past 5 months. The same bright smile. The same soft kiss on my temple as she set the glass down. Drink up, honey, she said. You have been looking so tired lately. I wrapped my hand around the glass. The surface was cold and damp with condensation. I raised it to my lips. I could smell the fruit, the faint bitterness of spinach beneath the sweetness. For 5 months I had swallowed this without question. Every morning, without hesitation, Sophie turned toward the stove to flip a pan of scrambled eggs. The moment her back was to me, I moved. I reached beneath the island and grabbed the insulated thermos I had placed there before she woke up. I unscrewed the lid, poured the entire smoothie inside, and sealed it shut. Then I picked up the empty glass and set it back on the counter with a quiet clink. When Sophie turned around, I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and smiled. Good? She asked. Perfect, I said. Like always. She smiled. That smile. I had once believed it was the warmest thing in my world. Now it made the hair on my arms stand on end. 20 minutes later, she handed me a small white pill from the medicine cabinet. Do not forget your supplement, she said gently. You know how much it helps your energy. The pill was round, unmarked, sitting in a plain bottle labeled Daily Wellness Complex. No brand name. No pharmacy sticker. I had been swallowing one every morning since July, without asking a single question. I palmed it, slipped it into my pocket when she turned away. Then I kissed her goodbye, grabbed my coat, and walked out the front door, as though nothing in the world had changed. I drove straight to Rosa's office in Capitol Hill. She was waiting. I set the thermos and the pill wrapped in tissue paper on her desk without a word. The smoothie, I said. And the vitamin she gives me every morning. Rosa picked up the thermos. She unscrewed the lid and looked inside. Then she examined the pill, turning it slowly under her desk lamp. I will have these at a lab I trust by noon, she said. Results by tomorrow morning. She called me at 7:15 the next day. I was sitting in my truck in the parking lot of a hardware store, engine running, heat on, staring at the mountains through the windshield. The smoothie contains 2 active compounds, Rosa said. Her voice was steady but tighter than usual. Lorazepam and donepezil. Lorazepam is a sedative. Donepezil is a medication designed for Alzheimer's patients. In a healthy person, especially combined with lorazepam, it produces confusion, memory loss, disorientation, and difficulty concentrating. I closed my eyes. The pill is zolpidem, she continued, a prescription sleep medication. The lab also detected a secondary compound, an antidepressant known to cause fatigue and cognitive fog. She paused. Mr. Brooks, your wife has been chemically inducing the symptoms of severe cognitive decline. If you had continued taking these for another 2 or 3 months, no doctor on earth would have questioned a diagnosis of early-onset dementia. I gripped the steering wheel. The mountains blurred in front of me. There is more, Rosa said. While waiting for the lab results, I ran a search on long-term care facilities in the Denver metro area using your name. A pause. I found a reservation. My stomach dropped. Pinecrest Memory Care Center in Boulder, she said. Patient name, Nathan Brooks. Reservation date, August 15th of this year. Deposit paid, $50,000. Monthly rate, $12,000. Scheduled admission date, December 15th. December 15th. 3 days from now. She has already retained an attorney to file for conservatorship, Rosa continued. Once a court declares you mentally incompetent, your wife becomes your legal guardian. She controls your finances, your property, your medical decisions. She can liquidate assets, modify legal documents, transfer funds, and no one questions it because legally you are incapable of managing your own affairs. I could not speak. The scale of what she was describing pressed against the walls of my skull, like water rising in a sealed room. And then what? I managed. Then you disappear into that facility, Rosa said quietly. A year, maybe 2. Your condition deteriorates. The drugs she has been giving you accelerate the decline. Eventually, you die. Heart failure, organ failure, complications related to advanced cognitive disease. She paused. The death certificate reads, natural causes. No one investigates. The grieving widow inherits everything. The truck felt like a coffin. I rolled down the window. Cold December air rushed in, and I breathed it like a man breaking the surface after being held underwater. Mr. Brooks, Rosa said. Her voice softened slightly. There is one more thing. I waited. The drug profile in your smoothie, the specific combination of compounds, it matches a case from 3 years ago. I heard her turning pages. A businessman in Cheyenne, Wyoming, named Robert Dawes, 58 years old, owner of a regional construction company. Construction. The word stuck in my throat. Dawes married a woman named Sarah Voss in 2019, Rosa continued. She was described as charming, intelligent, devoted. She had no verifiable history before 2016. No family, no close friends. Within 2 years of the marriage, Dawes began showing signs of rapid cognitive decline. His wife arranged for him to be placed in a residential care facility outside Cheyenne. What happened to him? I asked. My voice sounded like someone else's. Robert Dawes died in February of 2022, Rosa said. Official cause of death was liver failure. His wife inherited approximately $1.4 million and the construction company. She liquidated everything within 6 months. A pause. Then she vanished. Silence filled the truck. The mountains stood in the distance, massive and indifferent. Sarah Voss, I repeated. Sarah Voss, Rosa confirmed. And Mr. Brooks. The reason I am telling you this now is because I believe the woman you married and the woman Robert Dawes married may be the same person. The cold air pouring through the open window no longer felt like relief. It felt like the temperature of the room where my son had spent 9 months. It felt like the temperature of a grave. I need 48 hours, Rosa said. I am running fingerprints from the smoothie glass. If there is a match, we will know exactly who Sophie Hale really is. She paused one final time. In the meantime, go home. Act normal. Drink nothing she gives you. Take nothing she hands you. And do not let her see that you know. Rosa called at 6:45 on Monday morning. I was sitting in my truck in the driveway, engine off, watching the kitchen window where Sophie moved behind the glass preparing breakfast. Steam from the coffee maker drifted across the frame like fog. I found her, Rosa said. No greeting, no preamble. Just 3 words delivered with the controlled precision of someone reporting a confirmed threat. And it is worse than I thought. Can you meet me at my office in an hour? 40 minutes later, I was sitting across from Rosa's desk in her office on Capitol Hill. The space was small, efficient, every surface covered with purpose. Filing cabinets lined one wall. The opposite wall was covered in corkboard layered with pinned documents, photographs, and sections of red string connecting them like veins on a map. Several folders lay open on the desk. Rosa looked like she had not slept. The fingerprints from the smoothie glass came back, she said. She turned her laptop toward me. On the screen was a Colorado driver's license photograph. The woman in the image was younger, her hair darker and cut shorter. But the face was unmistakable. The same cheekbones, the same careful eyes, the same mouth that kissed me every morning before handing me a glass of poison. Her real name is Kara Voss, Rosa said. Born March 12, 1990, in Pueblo, Colorado. I stared at the photograph. Kara Voss. The name meant nothing to me. Not yet. She has a brother, Rosa continued. She pulled up a second photograph. A man in his mid-30s, with a broad jaw and close-cropped hair. Victor Voss. Born 1987. He changed his last name to Hale in 2018. 1 year after Kara created the Sophie Hale identity, Victor Hale. The man Jake had described. The man who came to the basement with Sophie. The man who built the room. Victor is a licensed construction engineer, Rosa said. He graduated from Colorado School of Mines in 2010. He worked for 3 different commercial construction firms between 2011 and 2017 before going independent. She tapped the screen. His specialties include structural reinforcement, concrete fabrication, and soundproofing. Soundproofing. The word sat in the air between us like smoke. He built the room in your basement, Rosa said. Professionally. Precisely. Using skills acquired over a decade of construction work. She leaned back slightly. Based on permit records and your travel schedule, the most likely construction window was a 3-week period last February when you were in Scottsdale for a project consultation. Sophie would have had the house to herself. 3 weeks. Victor had built a prison inside my home while I sat in an Arizona conference room reviewing floor plans for someone else's luxury resort. The irony was not lost on me. A builder who did not notice his own house being rebuilt around him. Now, Rosa said, Robert Dawes. She opened another file. Cheyenne, Wyoming. The businessman I told you about. She placed a photograph on the desk. A man in his late 50s with a ruddy face and kind eyes. Dawes owned Rocky Plains Construction, a mid-size firm specializing in commercial builds across Wyoming and northern Colorado. Construction. Again, in 2019, Dawes married a woman named Sarah Voss. Rosa placed a second photograph beside the first. Different hair, different style, but the same face staring back at me from every image on this desk. Kara. Within 18 months, Dawes began showing cognitive decline. Confusion, memory loss, inability to manage his business. His wife arranged conservatorship and placed him in a care facility outside Cheyenne. He died in February 2022. Rosa continued. Liver failure. Sarah Voss inherited the estate, approximately $1.4 million, and liquidated everything within 6 months. Then she disappeared. Rosa placed 3 photographs side by side on the desk. Robert Dawes. Megan Brooks. Me. A professional headshot from the Brooks Construction website, the one our marketing team had taken last spring. She targets wealthy men in the construction industry, Rosa said. That is the pattern. But not just any wealthy men. She looked at me with an expression that held no judgment, but no mercy either. She targets men who have secrets. Men who have something buried. Men who cannot afford to have their lives examined too closely. The room shrank around me. I understood what she was saying before she finished the sentence. Sophie had not chosen me because I was rich. She had not chosen me because I was lonely after Megan's death. She had chosen me because I was vulnerable. Because the moment anyone started digging into my life, they would find Aspen Ridge. And the moment they found Aspen Ridge, they would find the man I had destroyed to protect myself. Robert Dawes had a secret too, Rosa said quietly. Before his death, Rocky Plains Construction was under investigation by the Wyoming Department of Labor for safety violations at 2 job sites. Violations Dawes had covered up. She tapped his photograph. Kara finds men who cannot fight back because fighting back means exposing themselves. I felt dizzy. The walls of the office pressed inward. Mr. Brooks, Rosa said. Her voice was careful now. I need to ask you about Kara's father. Her father? Frank Voss. Rosa opened a new folder. A photograph of a man in his early 50s sat on top. Small frame, weathered hands, sun-darkened skin. He wore a plaid work shirt and stood in front of a white pickup truck with a toolbox in the bed. He looked like every subcontractor I had ever hired. Hardworking, humble, invisible to men like me. Frank Voss was a subcontractor based in Pueblo, Rosa said. He specialized in concrete work and foundation construction. Between 2008 and 2012, he held multiple contracts with a single client. She paused. Brooks? Construction. The name hit me before my brain could build a defense against it. Frank Voss. I knew that name. I had buried it deep, years ago, in the same place I buried everything about Aspen Ridge. But hearing it now, in this room, surrounded by photographs of the women his daughter had become and the men she had destroyed, the burial failed. The memory surfaced whole and terrible. What happened to him? I asked. But I already knew. Rosa studied me for a long time. Her brown eyes were steady and unblinking. That is the part you are not going to like, Mr. Brooks, she said quietly. Because the answer is you. Rosa opened a folder that looked heavier than the others. The cover was plain manila, but the pages inside were thick with documents, photographs, and photocopied records that spanned nearly a decade. She placed it on the desk between us and turned it so I could read the label printed in neat block letters along the tab. Frank Voss. Brooks Construction. 2008 through 2015. Frank Voss started working as a subcontractor for your company in 2008, Rosa said. He specialized in foundation work and concrete finishing. Small crew, 3 or 4 men. Based out of Pueblo. She placed a photograph on the desk. The same man from before. Plaid shirt, weathered hands, standing beside his white truck. Over 4 years, he completed 11 projects for Brooks Construction. His work reviews were consistently rated excellent. He was reliable, affordable, and meticulous. I remembered him. The memory arrived not as a single image, but as a series of small moments I had spent years trying to forget. Frank standing in a half-finished parking garage in Aurora, checking rebar spacing with a tape measure. Frank shaking my hand at a job site in Littleton, his grip rough and firm. Frank sitting across from me in my office, a folder of documents in his lap, his voice quiet, but steady. In 2012, Rosa continued. Your company broke ground on Aspen Ridge condominiums in Aspen. 42 luxury units, estimated value at completion of $96 million. Frank Voss was hired to handle the foundation and lower structural work. She pulled out a set of stapled documents. Inspection reports. Material invoices. Specification sheets. 3 months into the project, she said. Frank discovered discrepancies between the contracted material specifications and the materials actually being delivered to the site. The concrete grade was lower than what building codes required. The rebar was spaced wider than structural standards permitted. And the supplier, a company called Front Range Materials, was billing at rates roughly 30% below market price. She looked up at me. Front Range Materials was a shell company, Mr. Brooks. It existed for 14 months and dissolved 3 weeks after Aspen Ridge was completed. Its only client was Brooks Construction. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. Everything she was telling me was true. Frank brought his findings to you directly, Rosa said. He came to your office in October of 2012 with a folder containing photographs, measurements, and material samples. He told you that the foundation work at Aspen Ridge did not meet code. He told you that the building was structurally compromised. He asked you to halt construction and bring the materials up to standard. The memory sharpened into focus. Frank sitting in the leather chair across from my desk, his hands steady, his voice calm. He was not angry. He was concerned. He believed he was doing the right thing. He believed I would listen. You refused, Rosa said. And then you did something else. I stared at the desk. You terminated Frank's contract effective immediately. You cited performance issues that did not exist. Then you contacted 6 other general contractors in the Colorado Front Range region and informed them that Frank Voss had been removed from a project for substandard work and material fraud. Rosa paused to let the weight of the words settle. Within 4 months, every pending contract Frank had was canceled. His reputation in the industry was destroyed. He could not find work anywhere in the state. She placed another document on the desk. A bank foreclosure notice dated March 2014. He lost his home. His wife filed for divorce in June of the same year. She moved to New Mexico with their younger cousins. I remembered something else. A phone call. Late at night. Frank's voice on the other end. Not angry, not threatening. Just tired. Broken in a way that made his words sound like they were coming from underwater. Mr. Brooks, I have 2 children. I just need you to tell people the truth. That is all I am asking. I had hung up. I had not called back. On August 14th, 2015, Rosa said quietly, Frank Voss drove to a trailhead outside Pueblo and did not come home. The office was completely silent. I could hear the blood moving through my own ears. His daughter Kara was 25 years old, Rosa continued. His son Victor was 28. They found him the following morning. Rosa reached into the folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. A photocopy, slightly faded, the handwriting small and careful. She placed it in front of me. This is his suicide note, she said. It was found in the glove compartment of his truck. I looked down at the page. The handwriting was neat. The letters formed with the precision of a man who had spent his life measuring and building. A man who understood that details mattered. To my children. I am sorry I could not fight harder. The system was built for men like Nathan Brooks, not for men like me. I tried to do the right thing, and it cost me everything. Please do not become bitter. Please do not become like them. I love you both more than I can say. Take care of each other. Dad. I read it twice. The second time, the words blurred. My hands were trembling against the desk. Not from anger, not from fear, from the specific kind of sickness that comes when you finally see the full shape of what you have done. Frank Voss had been an honest man. He had found a problem and reported it to the person responsible. That person was me, and I had erased him. Not with violence, not with threats, but with something quieter and more efficient. I had used the machinery of an industry built on handshakes and reputation to grind a good man into dust. And then I had moved on to the next project without looking back. Please do not become like them, Frank had written. But his daughter had become exactly that. She had studied me the way I studied blueprints. She had identified my weaknesses, my vulnerabilities, the cracks in my foundation. And then she had started dismantling me the same way I had dismantled her father. Slowly. Methodically, without mercy. The difference was that Frank's weapon had been the truth. Kara's weapon was deception. But the engine driving both of them was the same thing. Me. Rosa let the silence hold for a long time. Then she spoke. There is one more thing, Mr. Brooks. Her voice was softer now than I had ever heard it. Your wife, Megan. I have been looking into the circumstances of her death. She paused. I do not believe she died of natural causes. I looked up at her. The room tilted slightly. What do you mean? Rosa held my gaze. I think Kara got to her first. The floor beneath my chair seemed to shift. Not literally. The office did not move. But something inside the architecture of my understanding buckled, the way a wall buckles when the foundation beneath it fails. Megan. My first wife, the woman who taught me that a house is not a home until someone fills it with laughter. The woman who planted sunflowers along our fence every spring because she said the neighborhood needed more yellow. Tell me, I said. My voice came out flat, emptied. Rosa pulled a new set of documents from the folder. She arranged them on the desk with the careful precision of someone building a case she knew would be difficult to hear. Megan Brooks passed away on January 14, 2021, she said. The official cause of death was acute liver failure. Her physicians attributed it to prolonged use of prescription pain medication following a back surgery she underwent in 2019. Rosa paused. At the time, the explanation made medical sense. Acetaminophen toxicity is a well-documented cause of liver damage. No one questioned it. But you did, I said. I questioned it because of the pattern, Rosa said. Robert Dawes in Cheyenne also died of liver failure. A healthy man in his late 50s, no prior history of liver disease, married to a woman who turned out to be Cara Voss. She tapped the desk lightly. One liver failure death connected to Cara could be coincidence. 2 is a signature. She opened her laptop and turned the screen toward me. A database I did not recognize filled the display. Columns of names and dates and employment records. I traced Victor Hale's employment history, she said. Between July of 2020 and January of 2021, he worked for a company called Mountain Harvest Organics. She looked at me. Do you recognize that name? My stomach clenched. I did recognize it. Mountain Harvest was the organic food delivery service Megan had subscribed to during the last year of her life. She had been passionate about clean eating. Every week a box arrived on our doorstep filled with vegetables, grains, prepared meals, and herbal supplements. She swore by it. She said the food made her feel healthier than she had in years. Until it did not. Victor worked in their fulfillment center, Rosa continued. He had direct access to the preparation and packaging of customer orders, including the orders shipped to your address. She slid a lab report across the desk. The header read, Independent Toxicology Analysis. Below it was a series of chemical compound names, measurements, and reference ranges. After our conversation about Megan, I contacted Jake, Rosa said. He told me he kept a small box of his mother's personal belongings. Photographs, a bracelet, a birthday card she wrote him. She paused. And a lock of her hair. He cut it himself the night before the funeral. I remembered. Jake had stood beside the casket with a pair of scissors, his hands shaking, tears running down his face. He was 19 years old. He wanted something to hold on to. Something physical. Something that would not fade the way memories do. I had the hair sample analyzed, Rosa said. The results show acetaminophen concentrations significantly higher than what her prescribed medication would produce. The levels are consistent with chronic supplemental dosing over a period of approximately 6 months. 6 months. July to January. The exact period Victor worked at Mountain Harvest. Someone was adding acetaminophen to her food, Rosa said quietly. Not enough to cause immediate symptoms. Just enough to accumulate in her liver over time. Slowly, steadily, building toward organ failure that would look exactly like a natural complication of her existing medication. The lab report blurred in front of me. I blinked and realized my eyes were wet. It is the same method used on Robert Dawes, Rosa continued. Slow poisoning through daily consumption. The victim never suspects because the symptoms develop gradually. Fatigue, nausea, loss of appetite. By the time liver function deteriorates to a critical level, the damage is irreversible. I sat very still. The memory of Megan's last 6 months played behind my eyes, like a film I could not stop. She had been tired. Constantly tired. She told me the food tasted strange sometimes, metallic, slightly off. I told her she was overthinking it. She said she felt nauseated after meals. I suggested she eat less. She said something was wrong. I said it was probably stress. She told me. She told me something was happening to her body. And I did not listen. I was reviewing contracts for a new development in Vail. I was negotiating a land acquisition in Steamboat Springs. I was busy. I was always busy, and Megan sat across the dinner table growing weaker every day, while I talked about square footage and profit margins. She tried to tell me, I said, The words scraped against my throat. She said the food tasted wrong. She said she did not feel right. And I told her she was imagining things. Rosa said nothing for a moment. The office was silent, except for the low hum of her laptop fan. "Mr. Brooks," she said gently. "You could not have known. I should have listened." The silence returned, heavier this time. I stared at the lab report, at the numbers that translated my wife's murder into clinical data. Acetaminophen, milligrams per centimeter, reference range exceeded by 300%. Megan had been reduced to measurements on a page. And somewhere beneath those measurements was the truth I would carry for the rest of my life. I had been too busy building things to notice that the most important person in my world was being taken apart. "We need to go to the FBI," Rosa said. Her voice shifted back to its professional register. "This is beyond what a private investigation can handle. Kidnapping, poisoning, murder, financial fraud. This is federal." I nodded slowly. Then I stopped. "Rosa," I said, "if I go to the FBI, everything comes out. Not just Kara, not just the poisoning." I met her eyes. Aspen Ridge, Frank Voss, the materials fraud, the cover-up, what I did to that man and his family. Rosa held my gaze without flinching. She did not try to comfort me. She did not offer reassurance. She simply looked at me the way she looked at every piece of evidence that crossed her desk, directly, honestly, without softening the edges. "Yes," she said. "It does." I looked down at my hands. The hands that had poured concrete and framed walls and signed contracts that destroyed a man's life. The same hands that had held Megan's while she lay in a hospital bed. Her skin yellow, her body failing, while I believed it was fate instead of poison. "Then it comes out," I said. "All of it. I am done hiding." Rosa studied me for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression. Not sympathy. Something closer to respect. "I will set up the meeting," she said. "FBI Denver. Tomorrow morning." I nodded and stood. My legs felt unsteady beneath me. At the door, I paused and turned back. Rosa. The letter Frank wrote. He told his children not to become bitter, not to become like the people who hurt him. I swallowed. They did not listen, did they? Rosa shook her head slowly. "No," she said quietly. "They did not." I walked out into the cold Denver morning. The sun was up, but it gave no warmth. The mountains stood along the western horizon, white and immovable, the way they had stood for millions of years before I was born, and would stand for millions more after I was gone. They did not care about Aspen Ridge or Frank Voss or the poison in my wife's food. They did not care about the room beneath my basement or the woman who built her life around destroying mine. But I cared. And for the first time in 12 years, I was going to do the right thing, even if it destroyed me. The FBI Denver field office occupied the upper floors of a concrete and glass building on Stout Street in the heart of downtown. I had driven past it 1,000 times without ever looking up. It was the kind of building designed to be overlooked, plain and institutional, the architectural equivalent of a closed fist. Walking through the lobby that morning felt like stepping into a world I had spent my entire career pretending did not apply to me. Rosa was already there when I arrived. Ben had driven separately and stood near the elevator bank adjusting his tie with the nervous energy of a man who understood that what happened in the next hour would determine the trajectory of multiple lives. Mine, Jake's, Kara's, and possibly his own, because Ben had helped me bury Aspen Ridge 12 years ago, and he knew that whatever door we were about to open could not be closed again. We took the elevator to the 7th floor and were escorted through a security checkpoint into a windowless conference room. The walls were bare except for a single American flag mounted in the corner. A long table dominated the center of the room. The chairs were metal and uncomfortable by design. Special Agent Derek Hammond was already seated at the far end of the table. He was younger than I expected. Early 40s. Dark hair cut short, square jaw. He wore a navy suit without a tie, and his sleeves were rolled to the forearms as though he had been working since before dawn. His eyes were sharp and still, the kind of eyes that recorded everything and revealed nothing. "Mr. Brooks," he said. He did not stand. He did not smile. He gestured to the chairs across from him. "Please." We sat. Rosa opened her laptop and began placing folders on the table in a sequence she had clearly rehearsed. Hammond watched without interrupting. "Agent Hammond," Rosa said, "I will walk you through the evidence chronologically. I ask that you hold questions until I have finished." Hammond nodded once. Rosa spoke for 35 minutes. She started with Sophie Hale's non-existent identity, moved through the fabricated business, the marriage, the drugging, the conservatorship filing, the Pinecrest reservation. She detailed the kidnapping of Jake, the hidden room, the soundproofing, the camera. She presented the toxicology results from the smoothie and the pills. She laid out the connection to Robert Dawes in Cheyenne, the identical drug profiles, the matching cause of death. She identified Kara Voss and Victor Voss by their real names, their family history, their father's suicide. And she finished with Megan. The hair sample analysis, the acetaminophen levels, Victor's employment at Mountain Harvest Organics during the exact window of Megan's poisoning. When she finished, the room was silent. Hammond sat motionless for several seconds. Then he leaned forward and folded his hands on the table. "We have been tracking a pattern of financial fraud and suspicious deaths across the Rocky Mountain region for approximately 2 years, he said. His voice was calm and measured. 3 cases in Wyoming, 2 in Montana, 1 in Utah, all involving wealthy men in the construction or real estate industries, all involving wives or partners with fabricated identities, all ending in either death or institutionalization of the male victim." He paused. "We have suspected a coordinated operation, but lacked a surviving victim and actionable evidence." He looked directly at me. "Your case gives us both." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "We need to catch her confessing," Hammond said. "Recordings. Audio. Ideally video. Conversations in which Sophie, or Kara, discusses the plan openly. The kidnapping, the drugging, the financial scheme. We need her words in her own voice, admitting to what she has done." He opened a metal case on the table. Inside were several objects that looked ordinary. A pen, a phone charger, a small desk clock. "Concealed recording devices," he explained. "The pen is the most practical. Fits in a shirt pocket, captures audio within a 15-foot radius." He slid the case toward me. "You will need to wear this during any interaction with Sophie or Victor. At the critical moment, when they believe you are fully incapacitated and they feel safe enough to speak freely, that is when we get what we need." "The plan," Rosa said, "is to let Sophie proceed with her timeline. She has scheduled your admission to Pinecrest for December 15th. Before that, she will likely arrange for you to sign documents transferring CEO authority and financial control. When she and Victor are in the room together, confident that you are no longer a threat, they will talk. People always do." Hammond nodded. "We will have a team positioned nearby. The moment we have sufficient recorded evidence, we move in." Ben leaned forward. "And the legal protections for Nathan?" Hammond looked at Ben, then at me. His expression did not change, but something in his posture shifted, a slight straightening of the shoulders. "Mr. Brooks," he said, "I need to be direct with you. When this operation concludes, the investigation does not end with Kara Voss." He held my gaze. "The evidence Rosa has compiled includes detailed documentation of material fraud at Aspen Ridge condominiums, falsified inspection reports, a shell supply company, the systematic destruction of a whistleblower's career and livelihood." The room felt smaller. "When we arrest Kara Voss, the case file becomes part of the federal record," Hammond continued. "Everything in it. Her crimes and the circumstances that enabled them, including your role in what happened to Frank Voss. I heard Ben inhale beside me. A sharp, controlled breath. Are you prepared for that? Hammond asked. His voice carried no judgment, just clarity. The clarity of a man whose job was to lay facts on a table and let people decide what to do with them. I thought about Frank's letter. Please do not become like them. I thought about Megan saying the food tasted strange. I thought about Jake counting 274 days on a thin mattress beneath my kitchen floor. Yes, I said. I am prepared. Hammond studied me for a moment. Then he nodded. Good. Go home tonight. Begin the performance tomorrow. Act confused. Forget things. Let Sophie believe the drugs are working. His voice hardened slightly. And whatever you do not let her suspect that you know. If she runs, we lose her. And we may never find her again. I took the recording pen from the case. It was heavier than it looked. I slipped it into my shirt pocket. We shook hands. Rosa gathered her files. Ben said nothing as we walked to the elevator. In the lobby, he stopped and looked at me. Nathan, he said quietly. Are you sure about this? No, I said. But I am done being sure about the wrong things. I drove home through afternoon traffic. The sun sat low over the mountains, turning the snow on the peaks a deep amber. The city moved around me the way it always did. Ordinary. Indifferent. I pulled into the driveway at 4:30. The kitchen light was on. Through the window I could see Sophie setting the table for dinner. She moved with the same effortless grace I had once found so comforting. Every gesture rehearsed. Every detail controlled. I sat in the truck for a full minute. Then I reached into my pocket and touched the pen. I walked inside. There you are, Sophie said. She crossed the kitchen and kissed me. Her hands rested warmly against my chest. She smelled like rosemary and garlic. How was your day? She asked. Long, I said. I took the smoothie glass she offered and held it in both hands. Green. Cold. Familiar. You look exhausted, she said softly. Drink up. It will help. I raised the glass to my lips. I did not drink, but I smiled. Thank you, honey, I said. You always take such good care of me. For 3 weeks, I lived 2 lives inside the same skin. One was the man Sophie saw. Confused, deteriorating, forgetting the names of people he had known for decades. The other was the man I actually was. Alert, furious, recording every word that left her mouth while the pen in my shirt pocket captured it all. The performance began the morning after the FBI meeting. I stood in the kitchen doorway staring at Sophie as she poured coffee. I let my face go blank. I let my eyes drift out of focus the way I had seen Alzheimer's patients do during hospital visits years ago. Good morning, Sophie said brightly. She held out a mug. I took it. Looked at her. Then I said, Thank you, Megan. The name landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Sophie's smile faltered for exactly 1 second. Then she recovered. She set her own mug down and placed her hand over mine. It's Sophie, honey, she said gently. Your wife. Sophie. I blinked slowly. Right, I murmured. Sorry. I don't know why I said that. It's okay, she whispered. But I saw it. A flicker behind her eyes that moved too fast for most people to catch. Not concern. Satisfaction. The quick, bright pulse of a predator watching its prey weaken. She hid it immediately beneath a mask of worried tenderness. But I had seen it. And I would never unsee it. Over the following days, I escalated the performance gradually. I left the stove burner on twice. I asked Sophie the same question about dinner plans 3 times in 1 hour. I stood in the hallway outside our bedroom and told her I could not remember which room was ours. I called my office and asked to speak with a project manager who had retired 4 years earlier. Each time, Sophie responded with patience and warmth. She guided me to the correct room. She answered the repeated questions without irritation. She turned off the stove and kissed my forehead. "It's all right, sweetheart. Everyone forgets things." And each time, I watched for the flicker. It was always there. Brief, controlled, instantly concealed, but present. She was pleased. The drugs were working, or so she believed. Her timeline was on schedule. Every morning I poured the smoothie into the thermos hidden beneath the kitchen island. Every morning, I palmed the white pill and slipped it into my pocket. And every morning Sophie watched me with the tender expression of a devoted wife caring for her ailing husband. The performance was mutual. We were both acting. The only difference was that I knew we were both acting, and she thought she was the only one. 3 times a week, when Sophie left the house for her fabricated client meetings, I drove to Ben's house to see Jake. Each visit, he looked a little more like the son I remembered. Margaret fed him constantly. Thick soups, roasted chicken, fresh bread. The kind of meals designed to rebuild a body that had been starved for 9 months. The hollows beneath his cheekbones were slowly filling. His arms no longer looked like they might snap under their own weight. He was sleeping better, though Margaret told me he still woke sometimes in the middle of the night screaming, reaching for walls that were not there. We did not talk about Aspen Ridge during those visits. We did not talk about Sophie or Kara or the room beneath the basement floor. We talked about small things. Football scores. A documentary Jake had watched about coral reefs. A novel Ben had recommended. We talked the way fathers and sons talk when they are trying to rebuild something broken. Carefully. Gently. One ordinary conversation at a time. But at night the performance resumed. I lay in bed beside Sophie in the dark, listening to her breathe. Slow, even, undisturbed. The breathing of a woman who slept soundly because she believed everything was going according to plan. I stared at the ceiling and thought about Megan. She had lain in this same bed. She had breathed this same air. She had trusted the food that arrived on her doorstep every week, food that someone had laced with poison, while I sat across the dinner table discussing quarterly revenue. How many nights had Megan lain awake in this room feeling her body fail, wondering what was wrong while the answer sat packaged in her refrigerator? How many mornings had she looked at me across the kitchen and hoped I would listen? I had not listened. I had been building things. That was always my excuse. I was building things. But the truth was simpler and uglier. I had been so consumed by construction that I failed to notice the most important structure in my life was collapsing from the inside. Sophie stirred beside me. She rolled over and rested her hand against my chest. "Can't sleep?" she murmured. "Bad dreams," I said. She stroked my chest softly. "About what?" "I don't remember," I whispered. "I can't remember anything anymore." She kissed my shoulder. "It's going to be okay," she said. "I am going to take care of everything." I closed my eyes and let her hold me. The woman who had poisoned my wife. The woman who had locked my son in a box. The woman who was methodically erasing my mind so she could steal everything I had built and then let me die in a facility where no one would ask questions. Her hand was warm against my chest. Her breathing slowed back into sleep. I lay perfectly still and counted the days. On the morning of December 11th, Sophie sat down across from me at the breakfast table with an expression of rehearsed concern. "Honey," she said carefully, "I have been thinking. You have been struggling so much lately. The forgetfulness, the confusion." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I think it is time to see a specialist." I looked at her with the vacant expression I had spent 3 weeks perfecting. "A specialist? A neurologist," she said. "Someone who can help us understand what is happening." She squeezed my hand. "I already made an appointment. His name is Dr. Grant Mercer. He is very well respected. Tomorrow afternoon, Dr. Grant Mercer." Victor Voss in a white coat and a borrowed name. The man who had built the prison where my son spent 9 months. The man who had poisoned my wife through her groceries. Tomorrow he would walk into my home, look into my eyes, and pretend to be a physician, and I would sit there and let him. "Okay," I said softly. "If you think that is best." Sophie smiled. "I do," she said. "It is the right thing, sweetheart." She cleared the breakfast dishes. I sat at the table staring at the chair where Megan used to sit every morning. And I waited. The morning of December 11th arrived wrapped in silence. No wind, no birdsong. Just the pale winter sun pressing through the bedroom curtains like a hand trying to wake something that didn't want to get up. Sophie had laid out my clothes the night before. A navy sweater, gray slacks, brown loafers. She'd even set my watch on the nightstand. Face up, the way a mother might prepare a child for his first day of school. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said from the doorway. She was already dressed. Black slacks, cream blouse, hair pinned back. Professional. Controlled. "Doctor, Mercer's office is at 10. I made your smoothie." I looked at the green glass on the nightstand. The smoothie I would pretend to drink and pour down the bathroom sink the moment she turned her back. "Thank you," I said. I let my voice drag, the way I'd practiced for 3 weeks. Slower than normal. A half-second delay before every response, as if my brain needed extra time to find the words. "Is it Tuesday?" "It's Thursday, Nathan." She smiled. Patient. Warm. The smile of someone who had been poisoning me for 5 months and was now 4 days from finishing the job. I nodded slowly. "Thursday." "Right." The drive took 40 minutes. Sophie drove my black Escalade through light snow on I-25, heading north toward a medical plaza in Broomfield. She talked the entire way. Gentle. Reassuring things. How Dr. Mercer was one of the best neurologists in Colorado. How the appointment was just a precaution. How she wanted to make sure I was getting the care I deserved. Every word was a brick in the wall she was building around me. The medical plaza was a 2-story beige building with tinted windows and a sign that read Rocky Mountain Neurological Associates. Inside, the waiting room smelled like new carpet and antiseptic. Sophie checked me in at the front desk while I sat in a leather chair, staring at a framed photograph of Pikes Peak on the wall. I counted my breaths the way Rosa had taught me. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Stay calm. Stay in character. Nathan Brooks? A nurse in blue scrubs appeared at the hallway door. Young. Maybe 25. She smiled at me, with the kind of pity people reserve for the elderly and the confused. Sophie took my arm and guided me down the hallway. Room 4. She opened the door for me. Inside. An exam table covered in white paper. A desk with a computer monitor. 2 chairs. A blood pressure cuff mounted on the wall. "Dr. Mercer will be right in," the nurse said. We sat. Sophie held my hand. Her fingers were warm and dry. Mine were cold and damp with sweat. I couldn't let her see. 2 minutes. 3. The door opened. He was tall. 6'2", maybe 6'3". Broad shoulders. A white lab coat over a blue button-down shirt. Wire-rimmed glasses. Dark hair combed neatly to the side. A stethoscope draped around his neck. A clipboard in his left hand. "Mr. Brooks? I'm Dr. Grant Mercer." He extended his right hand. His grip was firm, practiced. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Your wife has told me a great deal about your symptoms." I looked at his face and felt the floor tilt beneath me. I knew this face. Not from a photograph. Not from a file Rosa had shown me. I knew it because I had built houses with a man who had this exact jawline. These exact deep-set eyes. This exact way of holding his chin slightly raised, as if the world owed him something. Frank Voss. This was Frank Voss's son. Victor, the man who had built my son's prison. The man who had sealed Jake behind concrete and foam and left him to rot for 9 months. He was standing 3 feet away from me, wearing a lab coat and a name that didn't belong to him. and he was about to examine my brain. I shook his hand. I smiled. I said, "Nice to meet you, doctor." 3 weeks of acting had prepared me for this moment. But nothing could have prepared me for the rage. It started in my chest, a white-hot wire tightening around my ribs, and I had to clench my left fist behind my thigh to keep my hands from shaking. Dr. Mercer sat at the desk and opened a manila folder. "Mrs. Brooks mentioned you've been experiencing some memory difficulties over the past several months. Forgetting names, repeating questions. Some confusion about dates and times." "Yes," I said, slowly, carefully. "It's been hard. I can't always remember what day it is. Sometimes I call my wife by the wrong name." "What name do you call her?" "Megan." I paused. "That was my first wife. She passed away." Sophie squeezed my hand. I could feel her satisfaction radiating through her palm like heat. Victor nodded and scribbled something on his clipboard. He conducted a standard cognitive assessment. Asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. I deliberately stumbled at 79 and again at 58. He asked me to draw a clock showing 10 minutes past 11. I drew the numbers slightly out of order, the way Rosa had shown me from medical literature on early-stage dementia patients. He asked me to remember 3 words: apple, table, penny. 5 minutes later, he asked me to recall them. I said, apple, table, and I let my eyes drift to the ceiling. "I'm sorry. I can't remember the third one." "That's perfectly all right, Nathan." Victor's voice was smooth and practiced, a performance matching my own. He turned to Sophie. "Based on what I'm seeing today, and the history you've provided, I'd recommend a comprehensive evaluation at a residential facility. I work closely with Pinecrest Memory Care Center in Boulder. They have an opening on December 15th. December 15th. 4 days away." The exact date Rosa had already uncovered in their plan. Sophie nodded, her face arranged in an expression of loving concern. "Whatever you think is best, doctor. I just want him to get the help he needs." Victor handed her a folder. Inside, I caught a glimpse of admission forms, medical authorization papers, and a power of attorney document that would transfer all medical and financial decisions to Sophie Hale Brooks. "I'll need both of your signatures on the admission paperwork," Victor said. "We can finalize everything at Pinecrest on the 15th. I stared at the folder in Sophie's hands. 4 days. 4 days until they planned to lock me away, drain my accounts, sell my company, and disappear. The same way they had done to Robert Dawes in Wyoming. The same pattern. The same ending. Except this time, the ending would be different. Because Agent Derek Hammond and a surveillance team from the FBI's Denver field office were listening to every word through the recording pen in my shirt pocket. I looked at Victor. He looked back at me with steady, professional eyes. 2 men performing for each other across an exam table, each one knowing exactly what the other was hiding. Or so he thought. "December 15th, I repeated, letting my voice wobble. That sounds good." Sophie kissed my cheek in the parking lot. "You're so brave," she whispered. "Everything is going to be fine." I nodded. And somewhere in that nod was the truth she couldn't see. In 4 days, everything was going to end. But not the way she planned. The 4 longest days of my life did not pass quickly. They crawled. Each hour stretched like wet concrete poured into a mold too large for it, spreading thin and heavy and refusing to set. I moved through the house on Cherry Creek, the way I had for 3 weeks. Slowly, uncertainly. A man dissolving at the edges. But now the weight of what was coming pressed against my chest every time I breathed. December 12th. Sophie made breakfast. Scrambled eggs, whole wheat toast, orange juice, a green smoothie in a tall glass. I sat at the kitchen island and ate the eggs and toast while she stood at the counter checking her phone, her thumb scrolling through something she angled away from me. "Who are you texting?" I asked. Not suspicious. Curious. the way a confused man might ask his wife about something he couldn't quite understand. "Just the office," she said. "Hale Design has a client meeting this afternoon." Hale Design. The company Rosa had confirmed did not exist. No office, no clients, no employees, a website built from stock photographs, and a voicemail number that rang to a prepaid phone. I poured the smoothie down the sink while she was in the shower. Then I rinsed the glass twice, set it on the counter, and stared at the drain where 5 months of lorazepam and zolpidem had disappeared. I wondered how many milligrams had already settled into my bones before I'd learned the truth. How many mornings I had stood in this exact spot, trusting the woman upstairs, drinking whatever she handed me, and feeling my mind fold inward like a house collapsing from the inside out. That afternoon I drove to Ben's house. Jake was sitting in the living room reading a paperback Margaret had bought him. He looked better. Not healthy, not yet, but better. The hollows beneath his cheekbones had begun to fill. His eyes had lost the glassy, faraway quality they'd carried the night I found him. He was eating 3 meals a day, sleeping 8 hours, and walking around the block each morning with Margaret. He was 23 years old and he was learning to be a person again. "How do you feel?" I asked him. He closed the book, looked at me, like someone who's been underground for 9 months and is trying to remember what the sun feels like. I sat beside him. The couch was the same brown leather couch where Ben and I had shared bourbon and argued about zoning laws for 20 years. Now it held my son, who had been held in a concrete box because of decisions I had made a decade before he was born. 4 days, I said. "I know. Are you ready?" Jake didn't answer immediately. He turned the paperback over in his hands, running his thumb along the spine. "I've been thinking about what happens after they're arrested, after the trial, after everything. What about it? You're going to have to tell the truth about Aspen Ridge, about what you did to Frank Voss, about the concrete, the inspections, all of it." I nodded. "I know. And you're okay with that?" I looked at my son, at the boy who had inherited Megan's dark eyes and my stubborn jaw, at the young man who had survived 9 months in a room that shouldn't exist because his father had cheated a man out of his livelihood 14 years ago. "No," I said. "I'm not okay with it. But it's the truth. And I owe that." Jake held my gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once and opened his book again. December 13th. Rosa called at noon. Her voice was clipped and precise, the way it always was when she had new information. "Victor Voss flew into Denver International last night on a United flight from Salt Lake City. He's staying at the Marriott on 17th Street, room 614. He checked in under the name Grant Mercer. He's still using the fake name. He's committed to the character. That's actually useful for us. The more he uses that identity in documented transactions, hotel check-ins, credit card charges, medical appointments, the stronger the fraud case becomes." "And Sophie?" "She made 2 phone calls yesterday from a burner phone she keeps in her car. One to Victor's hotel room, one to a lawyer named Dale Whitfield in Boulder. Whitfield specializes in conservatorship filings. He's preparing emergency guardianship papers for December 15th. Every piece locked into place like rebar in a concrete form. The doctor, the diagnosis, the lawyer, the conservatorship, the admission to Pinecrest. 5 separate instruments, each one designed to strip me of my identity, my money, my freedom, and my son." "Hammond's team is ready," Rosa continued. 4 agents plus local PD backup. They'll be positioned at Brooks Construction headquarters by 8 a.m. on the 15th. The plan hasn't changed. You sign the papers. You let them believe they've won. And when Sophie and Victor are both in the room with documented evidence of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy, Hammond moves in. "What if something goes wrong?" Rosa paused. 1 beat. 2. "Nathan, I've run operations against arms dealers in Juarez and money launderers in Miami. This is a brother-sister con team from Pueblo. Nothing is going to go wrong." I wanted to believe her. December 14th. The last night, Sophie cooked dinner. Grilled salmon, roasted asparagus, a glass of white wine she poured for herself, and a glass of water she poured for me. She was quieter than usual. Not nervous, Sophie was never nervous, but focused. The way a surgeon might be the evening before a complicated procedure. "Tomorrow is a big day," she said, setting the plates on the table. "Is it?" I asked. "Your appointment at Pinecrest. Dr. Mercer will be there to walk us through everything. And I've asked our lawyer to come too, just to make sure all the paperwork is in order." Paperwork? Medical power of attorney. Financial management. Things to protect you, sweetheart. She reached across the table and held my hand. Her eyes were soft, concerned, loving. "I just want to make sure you're taken care of." I looked at her hand on mine. The gold wedding band I had placed on her finger 3 years ago. The French manicure. The smooth, warm skin of a woman who had fed my first wife acetaminophen until her liver failed, who had locked my son in a concrete room for 9 months, who had poured sedatives into my morning smoothie every day for 5 months, and who was now sitting across from me planning to steal everything I had built in 26 years of work. "Thank you, Sophie," I said. "I don't know what I'd do without you." She smiled. And for one fraction of a second, I saw it. The flicker. That microscopic flash behind her eyes. Not warmth, not love, but calculation. The same expression a contractor wears when he looks at a building and knows exactly where to place the charges to bring it down. I went to bed at 9. Sophie kissed my forehead and whispered, "Good night, sweetheart." I lay in the dark and listened to her breathing slow beside me. Outside, snow fell on Cherry Creek in thick, silent curtains. The mountains were invisible behind the clouds, but I knew they were there. They were always there. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow it ends. I closed my eyes and saw Frank Voss's face. Not Victor's, not Kara's. Frank's. The man I had destroyed. The man whose children had spent 14 years becoming the instruments of his revenge. And I understood, lying in that bed beside the woman who wanted to erase me, that tomorrow would not only be the end of Sophie's plan, it would be the beginning of my debt. I woke before the alarm. 5:17 a.m. The bedroom was dark and cold, and Sophie was already gone from her side of the bed. The sheets pulled tight. The pillow smoothed flat, as if she had never been there at all. I lay still and listened. Downstairs, the coffee machine hissed. Cabinet doors opened and closed. The soft click of heels on hardwood. She was getting ready the way generals get ready before a battle they believe they have already won. I showered. Dressed in the navy sweater and gray slacks she had laid out for me 3 days ago, the same outfit from the doctor's appointment, because Sophie controlled even the small details. I slipped the recording pen into my breast pocket and pressed the button once. A faint vibration confirmed it was active. Somewhere across Denver, Agent Derek Hammond's team was receiving the signal. Downstairs, Sophie stood at the kitchen island, holding 2 travel mugs. She wore a charcoal blazer over a white silk blouse, pearl earrings. Her hair was down, soft around her shoulders. She looked like a woman attending a board meeting, not a woman about to commit her husband to a memory care facility and steal his life. "Good morning, sweetheart." She handed me a mug. Decaf. "Easy on your stomach." I took the mug. Held it. Did not drink. "Thank you, Sophie. How did you sleep?" "I don't remember," I said, and watched her smile. We drove to Brooks Construction headquarters on Blake Street in silence. The building was a 4-story brick structure I had purchased in 2004, back when Lodo was still transitioning from warehouses to restaurants and tech offices. My name was etched into the glass above the front door. Brooks Construction, built to last. I had chosen that slogan 20 years ago, when I still believed it applied to more than buildings. Sophie parked in the underground garage at 7:40. We took the elevator to the 4th floor, my floor, the executive suite, and walked down a hallway lined with framed photographs of projects I had built over 26 years. Shopping centers, office towers, residential developments. And there, third from the end, a photograph of the Aspen Ridge luxury condominiums, completed in 2012. The building that had made me rich and destroyed Frank Voss. I looked at it as we passed. Sophie didn't. The conference room at the end of the hall had floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Rocky Mountains. On a clear day, you could see all the way to Mount Evans. Today, the mountains were buried behind a wall of gray cloud, and snow was beginning to fall in thin, diagonal lines across the glass. Inside the conference room, 3 people were already seated at the long mahogany table. Dale Whitfield, the conservatorship lawyer from Boulder, mid-50s, silver hair, navy suit, leather briefcase open beside him with documents fanned across the table like a dealer's hand of cards. Victor Voss, wearing Dr. Grant Mercer's wire-rimmed glasses and white lab coat over a pressed blue shirt. He sat at the far end of the table with a manila folder and a calm expression that belonged to a man who had done this before, and a woman I did not recognize. Early 30s, dark hair pulled into a bun, gray pantsuit. She sat beside Whitfield with a notary stamp and a stack of blank signature pages. "Nathan, you remember Dr. Mercer," Sophie said, guiding me to a chair at the head of the table. "Of course." I nodded at Victor. He nodded back. Professional. Controlled. 2 actors on a stage built for one audience. "And this is Mr. Whitfield, our attorney. And Miss Delgado, who will notarize the documents." I shook their hands. Whitfield's grip was firm and brief. Miss Delgado smiled politely. Sophie sat to my right. She placed her hand on my forearm and addressed the room. "Thank you all for being here. As you know, my husband has been experiencing significant cognitive decline over the past several months. Dr. Mercer has recommended residential evaluation at Pinecrest Memory Care Center, and we're here today to complete the necessary legal and medical paperwork to ensure Nathan receives the care he needs." Her voice was steady, warm, and completely sincere. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed every word. I would have believed she loved me. I would have signed whatever she placed in front of me and thanked her for saving my life. Whitfield opened his briefcase and began laying documents on the table. "Mr. Brooks, I'll walk you through each document. The first is a voluntary admission form for Pinecrest Memory Care Center. The second is a durable medical power of attorney, granting your wife authority over all medical decisions. The third is a durable financial power of attorney, granting your wife authority over all financial assets, accounts, and real property. And the fourth is a conservatorship petition, which we will file with the Denver County Court on Monday. 4 documents, 4 signatures, 4 locks on a cage, built over 7 years. I looked at each page. I let my eyes drift over the words slowly, the way a man with failing memory might read a document he couldn't fully comprehend. I asked Whitfield to repeat several clauses. I asked what durable meant. I asked if Pinecrest was the place with the nice garden. Sophie answered for me. "Yes, sweetheart. The one with the garden." Victor scribbled notes. Whitfield adjusted his glasses. Miss Delgado uncapped her notary stamp. The room was quiet, except for the scratch of pens and the whisper of snow against the windows. 5 people in a conference room on the 4th floor of a building I had built with my own hands, and 3 of them were there to take everything from me. "Where do I sign?" I asked. Sophie squeezed my arm. "Right here, Nathan." She pointed to the first signature line. "Medical admission. Pinecrest Memory Care Center. Patient. Nathan Allen Brooks. Admission date. The 15th of December 2025. I picked up the pen, and then I set it down. "Before I sign," I said, and my voice was no longer slow, no longer confused, no longer the voice of a man whose mind was dissolving. "I want to make sure everyone in this room understands exactly what they're signing." The room went still. Sophie's hand froze on my arm. Victor's pen stopped mid-stroke. Whitfield looked up from his briefcase. Miss Delgado's fingers hovered above her stamp. I reached into my breast pocket and placed the recording pen on the mahogany table. "My name is Nathan Allen Brooks," I said. "I am of sound mind. I have not ingested any sedatives, hypnotics, or cognitive impairing substances in 31 days. Every word spoken in this room has been recorded and transmitted live to the Denver field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." I looked at Sophie. Her face had not changed. Not yet. But her eyes had. The warmth was gone. The love was gone. What remained was something flat and hard and ancient, like a stone pulled from a riverbed. "And your name," I said, "is not Sophie Hale. It's Kara Voss." The door to the conference room opened. Agent Derek Hammond walked through the door first. 5'9", compact build, dark suit, FBI badge clipped to his belt. Behind him came 3 agents in tactical vests, marked Federal Agent, and 2 Denver police officers in uniform. Hammond's eyes swept the room and stopped on Victor Voss. "Your real name is Victor James Voss. Born September 14th, 1987. Pueblo, Colorado. You are under arrest for kidnapping, false imprisonment, identity fraud, and practicing medicine without a license." He spoke without looking at a card. "Stand up and place your hands on the table." Victor stood slowly. The wire-rimmed glasses slid down his nose. He placed both hands flat on the mahogany surface. A tactical agent moved behind him and clicked the handcuffs shut. The sound was small, metallic, and final. Hammond turned to Sophie. She had not moved. Her hand was still resting on my forearm, fingers curled into the fabric of my sweater, as if holding on to me could hold together the lie she had built over 3 years. Kara Michelle Voss. Born March 12, 1990. Pueblo, Colorado. Also known as Sophie Hale. Also known as Sarah Voss. You are under arrest for kidnapping, false imprisonment, conspiracy to commit murder, poisoning, identity fraud, and elder abuse. She looked at me. Not at Hammond. At me. "You knew," she said quietly. "I've known for 31 days. Since the basement. Since Jake." Something shifted in her expression. Not surprise, but recognition. The recognition of a player who has been outplayed. "He was supposed to be sedated," she said. "I increased the Ambien in his water. He should have been unconscious when you went downstairs. He poured it out. He'd been pouring it out for 2 weeks. He learned to smell it. For the first time, something crossed her face that looked like genuine emotion. Not remorse. Frustration. The frustration of a woman who had planned every variable for 7 years and been undone by a boy who could smell Ambien in a water bottle. "Stand up, Miss Voss," Hammond said. She released my arm. The fabric was damp where her fingers had been. She straightened her blazer, adjusted her pearl earrings, and placed her hands behind her back. The handcuffs closed. She did not flinch. Hammond addressed Whitfield and Miss Delgado as material witnesses, ordered them escorted to the field office for questioning. Victor was let out first, his white lab coat catching on the doorframe. Then, Kara. She walked with her shoulders straight, and her heels clicking in the same measured rhythm I had heard every morning for 3 years. At the doorway, she stopped. "Nathan." I looked at her. "My father trusted you. He staked his family's future on a handshake with you in 2008. You used substandard materials, falsified inspections, and let him take the blame when the walls cracked. He lost his license, his home, every client he'd built over 20 years. On March 7, 2013, he drove to the top of a parking garage in Pueblo and stepped off the edge. The room was silent. "So before you call me a criminal," she said, "ask yourself who committed the first crime." The agent placed a hand on her shoulder. She turned and walked through the door and was gone. Hammond came back 2 minutes later. He sat in Kara's chair and placed a digital recorder on the table. "Clean operation," he said. "Audio and video from 3 sources. The pen, a hallway camera, and Agent Torres's body cam, combined with lab reports, the Pinecrest Reservation, conservatorship papers, and basement forensics. This is the strongest case I've built in 9 years. Robert Dawes? Cheyenne PD reopens today. Fingerprints from the smoothie glass match prints in Dawes's home. Same playbook. Seduction, marriage, drugging, conservatorship, asset liquidation. Dawes died of liver failure. February 2022. Same acetaminophen method. The same method they used on Megan. Hammond paused. Yes. Toxicology reanalysis on your wife's hair samples confirmed chronic acetaminophen exposure over 14 months. Deliberate, incremental poisoning. I closed my eyes. Megan, who had complained about headaches and fatigue and nausea for over a year while I traveled to job sites and signed contracts and trusted the woman who was feeding her poison at our kitchen table. Nathan. Hammond's voice pulled me back. The Aspen Ridge case. Substandard materials. Falsified inspections. Whistleblower retaliation against Frank Voss. Rosa brought us everything. We are not pursuing criminal charges at this time, but the U.S. Attorney's Office will review the file. There may be civil liability, regulatory consequences, questions. I understand. Do you? I built a building with concrete that didn't meet code. I signed off on fraudulent inspections. When Frank Voss reported it, I blacklisted him from every contractor network in Colorado until he couldn't feed his family. I met Hammond's eyes. Yes. Agent Hammond. I understand. He studied me for a long moment. Then he stood, collected his recorder, and walked toward the door. Your son is downstairs, he said. Ben Callahan brought him 15 minutes ago. He's waiting in the lobby. I looked at the conference table one last time. The documents. The signature lines. The spaces where my name was supposed to go. Surrendering everything I was to a woman who had spent 7 years learning how to destroy me. Then I walked out of the room and went downstairs to find my son. Jake was sitting on a bench in the lobby with his hands folded between his knees. He wore a flannel shirt Margaret had bought him and jeans that were still too loose around his waist. When he saw me step out of the elevator, he stood. Neither of us spoke. I crossed the lobby and held my son, and he held me back. And for a long time, the only sound was the hum of the heating system and the muffled noise of agents moving through the floors above us. Ben Callahan was leaning against the reception desk with his arms crossed. He watched us without saying a word. When we finally separated, Ben nodded once and said, "Let's go home." We drove to Ben's house. Margaret had made soup. We sat at the kitchen table. Me, Jake, Ben, Margaret, and ate, in the kind of silence that follows something enormous, the silence after a building comes down. The silence after the dust settles, and you realize you are still standing, but the landscape has completely changed. After lunch, Jake went upstairs and came back holding a leather-bound journal. Dark brown. Worn at the edges. A thin ribbon bookmark the color of rust. I found this in the Aspen Ridge file box, he said. In the basement. It was underneath the contracts and inspection reports. I've been reading it at Ben's house for the past 3 weeks. He placed it on the table in front of me. I recognized it immediately. The leather. The brass clasp. The small ink stain on the lower right corner where Megan had knocked over a bottle of fountain pen ink in 2017. It was Megan's journal. How did Sophie get this? I asked. She must have taken it from the house after Mom died. Jake said. It was mixed in with the Aspen Ridge files. I think she kept it as leverage, or evidence, or maybe she just wanted to understand the woman whose life she was replacing. I opened the cover. Megan's handwriting. Small, precise, slightly tilted to the right. The handwriting of a woman who had been an English teacher at East High School for 19 years, who corrected papers with a green pen instead of red because she said red felt like punishment. The first entry was dated the 3rd of January 2018. Nathan missed dinner again tonight. 3rd time this week. I know the Meridian Tower project is consuming him. But Jake called from Boulder and asked where his father was, and I didn't have a good answer. I'm starting to wonder if I ever did. I turned the pages slowly. Entry after entry. Months passing in Megan's steady hand. The journal was not a record of events. It was a record of loneliness. Of a woman who loved a man who was always somewhere else, at a job site, at a client dinner, at a conference in Phoenix or Dallas or Chicago, while she graded papers at the kitchen table and waited for headlights in the driveway. The 14th of March 2018. I asked Nathan about the Aspen Ridge settlement today. He changed the subject. He always changes the subject. I know something happened with that project. I know a man was hurt. But Nathan carries his guilt the way he carries everything, silently, behind a wall I can't get through. The 22nd of June 2018. Nathan hired a new designer for the office renovation. Sophie Hale. She's young, confident, beautiful. She brought me flowers when she came for dinner. Lilies. My favorite. I don't know how she knew that. I stopped reading. Lilies. Megan's favorite flower. A detail so small and so precise that only someone who had studied Megan, who had researched her, surveilled her, catalogued her preferences, the way a predator catalogues the habits of prey, would have known it. Sophie had been inside our lives months before I realized it. She had mapped Megan's world before she dismantled it. The 9th of September 2018. I've been feeling tired lately. More than tired. Heavy. My head aches most mornings, and my stomach turns after meals. Nathan says I should see Dr. Holbrook, but it's probably just stress. The school year always hits hard in September. The poisoning had started. September 2018. 14 months before Megan died. In November 2019. 14 months of acetaminophen in her food, in her tea, in the meals that Sophie occasionally brought to the house in glass containers with handwritten labels. Homemade granola, butternut squash soup, lemon bars wrapped in parchment paper, gifts from the woman who was killing her. I kept reading. The entries grew shorter as the months passed. The handwriting became less steady. By mid-2019, some entries were only a few lines. The 30th of July 2019. Dr. Holbrook says my liver enzymes are elevated. He wants more tests. I'm scared, but I don't want to worry Nathan. He has enough on his plate. The 2nd of October 2019. I can barely hold the pen today. Everything hurts. I've lost 11 pounds since August. Nathan took me to the hospital last week. They ran tests. Nobody can tell me what's wrong. The last entry was dated the 8th of November 2019, 11 days before she died. I know I'm dying. I can feel it the way you feel. A house settling, something shifting beneath you that you can't see but you know is there. I'm not afraid. I've had a beautiful life. I've had Jake. I've had Nathan, even when he wasn't fully here. I've had 19 years of students who wrote me letters and came back to visit and told me I mattered. If Nathan reads this someday, I want him to know. I forgave you a long time ago. For Aspen Ridge. For Frank. For all the nights you weren't home. I forgave you because that's what love does. It sees the whole person, the good and the broken, and it stays. Take care of Jake. Build something that matters. And stop carrying the wall, Nathan. Put it down. I closed the journal. The kitchen was quiet. Ben had his hand over his mouth. Margaret was crying silently into a dish towel. Jake sat across from me with his dark eyes. Megan's eyes fixed on my face. Megan's eyes. She knew, Jake said. About Aspen Ridge. About Frank Voss. She knew everything. And she never told you. She forgave me, I said. The words came out broken and strange, like pieces of concrete falling from a height. She forgave you before you even asked. I pressed my palms flat against the journal's leather cover. Megan's handwriting was underneath my fingers. Her thoughts. Her pain. her grace. Everything she had carried in silence while I built towers and signed contracts and pretended the past didn't exist. Kara Voss had kept this journal as a weapon. She had stored it with the Aspen Ridge files. Ammunition for the day she would need to prove Nathan Brooks was a fraud and a liar and a man who deserved everything that was coming to him. But Megan had turned it into something else. The last entry was not an accusation. It was not evidence. It was a door left open for a man who had spent his whole life building walls. I looked at Jake. I need to tell the truth. All of it. About Aspen Ridge. About Frank. About everything I did. Jake nodded. I know. It's going to cost us the company. The reputation. Maybe more. I know that too. Are you okay with that? My son looked at me the way his mother used to look at me, steady, clear, unafraid. Mom forgave you. Dad. But forgiveness isn't the same as pretending it didn't happen. You have to make it right. I held the journal against my chest and closed my eyes. Outside, the snow had stopped. Through Ben's kitchen window, the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. And the Rocky Mountains appeared on the horizon, white and massive and immovable, the way the truth always is when you finally stop looking away. The trial began on March 10th, 2025, in the United States District Court for the District of Colorado. Courtroom 4B. Judge Patricia Solano presiding. I had been inside courtrooms before. Depositions. Contract disputes. The Aspen Ridge settlement in 2014 that I had buried under a confidentiality agreement and $600,000. But I had never sat in a federal courtroom where the defendant was the woman who had shared my bed for 3 years, and the charges included conspiracy to commit murder. The prosecution was led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Moreno, a small woman with dark hair and a voice that carried across the courtroom like a hammer striking a nail. She opened with a timeline, a single projected slide showing 14 years of events, from Frank Voss's contract with Brooks Construction in 2008 to the arrest on December 15, 2024. This case, Moreno said, is about a family that was destroyed and another family that was built on the wreckage. It is about two siblings who spent 14 years planning, constructing, and executing a scheme of identity fraud, poisoning, kidnapping, and financial theft across 2 states. And it is about the man who set it all in motion without ever knowing the consequences. She looked at me when she said that last part. I did not look away. Kara Voss sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, her face blank. Victor sat beside her. Their attorney, a public defender named Thomas Gould, had filed motions to suppress the recording pen evidence and separate the trials. Both motions were denied. The prosecution's case took 11 days. Agent Hammond testified for 2. Rosa Gutierrez testified for 1. The forensic toxicologist from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation spent an entire afternoon explaining how chronic acetaminophen exposure destroys the liver in stages: inflammation, fibrosis, cirrhosis, failure, and how the concentrations found in Megan's hair samples were consistent with daily doses administered over 14 months. I watched the jury's faces as the toxicologist spoke. 12 people. Ordinary people. A school bus driver. A retired electrician. A woman who managed a Whole Foods in Aurora. They listened with the careful attention of people who were beginning to understand that the woman in the orange jumpsuit had watched another woman die slowly across a kitchen table and had done nothing except refill the container. Jake testified on March 18th. He walked to the stand in a navy suit that Ben had helped him buy, and he spoke for 3 hours about the room. The concrete walls, the foam panels, the single LED light that never turned off, the camera mounted in the corner, the cooler bag that appeared every Thursday with exactly 7 days of food and water, the silence, the darkness when the light flickered, the 9 months of not knowing if anyone was looking for him. When the prosecutor asked him to describe the moment his father found him, Jake paused. He looked at me. Then he said, I told him not to let her know, because I knew that if she found out, she would kill us both. The way she killed my mother. The courtroom was silent. Kara Voss stared straight ahead and did not blink. My testimony came on March 21st. I sat in the witness chair and faced Rachel Moreno, and she asked me to tell the truth. All of it. So I did. I told them about Aspen Ridge, about the concrete that didn't meet code 4,200 pounds per square inches, where the specifications called for 5,000, about the rebar spacing that was wider than the engineering plans required, about the inspection reports I had signed knowing they were false, about the $700,000 I saved by using substandard materials from a supplier who gave me a kickback I never reported. I told them about Frank Voss, how he had been my subcontractor for 4 years, how he had discovered the material deficiencies during a routine site check in October 2012, how he had come to my office with photographs and test results and asked me to fix it, and how I had told him that if he reported the deficiencies, I would terminate his contract and make sure no general contractor in Colorado ever hired him again. I told them how Frank lost everything: his license, his clients, his home on the south side of Pueblo, his marriage, and how, on March 7, 2013, he drove to the top level of a parking garage downtown and stepped off the edge, leaving behind 2 children, a 23-year-old son named Victor and a 22-year-old daughter named Kara, who would spend the next 11 years planning their revenge. Moreno asked me, "Mr. Brooks, do you accept responsibility for your role in the events that led to this case?" "Yes," I said. "I cheated a man who trusted me. I destroyed his career to protect my own. And when he died, I told myself it wasn't my fault. I was wrong. It was my fault. Not the kidnapping. Not the poisoning. Those were choices Kara and Victor made on their own. But the reason they made those choices, the reason any of this happened, started with me in a construction office in 2012, signing a paper I knew was a lie. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They returned on March 26th with guilty verdicts on all counts. Kara Voss was convicted of kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, poisoning resulting in death, identity fraud, and elder abuse. Victor Voss was convicted of kidnapping, false imprisonment, identity fraud, conspiracy, and practicing medicine without a license. Sentencing came in April. Kara received 47 years. Victor received 32. Neither showed emotion when Judge Solano read the sentences. They stood side by side in their orange jumpsuits, 2 children of Frank Voss, and they looked straight ahead at the wall behind the judge's bench, as if they could see through it to something on the other side. I sat in the gallery and watched them being led away, and I felt nothing close to victory. What I felt was the weight of a debt that a guilty verdict could not erase. 2 weeks after the sentencing, I met with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I voluntarily disclosed the full scope of the Aspen Ridge fraud: substandard materials, falsified inspections, whistleblower retaliation. I waived my right to the confidentiality agreement from the 2014 settlement. I agreed to full financial restitution: $2.3 million to the Aspen Ridge Homeowners Association, $400,000 to Frank Voss's estate, and a $750,000 civil penalty to the state of Colorado. The Colorado Contractors Board revoked my license for 5 years. Brooks Construction was placed under independent oversight. My name, which had been etched into buildings across the Front Range for a quarter-century, became something else, entirely a cautionary tale about what happens when a man decides that profit matters more than principle. I accepted all of it. Every dollar, every restriction, every headline, because Megan had asked me to put the wall down, and this was the only way I knew how. Spring came to Denver, the way it always does, slowly, reluctantly, as if the mountains were holding their breath before deciding to let the snow go. By late April, the creek behind the Cherry Creek house was running again, brown and fast with meltwater, and the cottonwood trees along the bank were pushing out their first pale green leaves. I sold the house in March. I couldn't sleep in it anymore. Not in the bedroom where Sophie had kissed my forehead, and whispered goodnight while planning to erase me. Not in the kitchen where she had blended 5 months of sedatives into green smoothies. Not above the basement where my son had spent 9 months in a concrete room listening to footsteps overhead and wondering if anyone remembered he existed. Jake and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill. Small. Clean. 3rd floor, south-facing windows. A view of nothing remarkable. A parking lot. A row of brick townhouses. The top of a church steeple. 3 blocks east. It was the first home I had lived in since 1998 that I hadn't built myself. And there was something honest about that. Something stripped down. Jake enrolled in summer courses at the University of Colorado, Denver. Psychology. He told me he wanted to understand what had been done to him, and more than that, he wanted to understand how to help other people who had survived things that shouldn't be survivable. He went to therapy twice a week with a trauma specialist in Lakewood. Some nights he woke up gasping, his hands pressed flat against the bedroom wall, as if checking whether it was concrete or drywall. On those nights I made coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table and talked until the sun came up. We didn't talk about Sophie. We didn't talk about the room. We talked about Megan. About the camping trips to Rocky Mountain National Park when Jake was 10. About the Thanksgiving she burned the turkey and we ate pizza on the living room floor. About the way she laughed, sudden and loud and completely unguarded. The laugh of someone who believed the world was mostly good. In May, I did something I should have done 12 years ago. I drove to Pueblo. The parking garage where Frank Voss died was still standing. 6 stories. Gray concrete. A chain-link fence along the top level that hadn't been there in 2013. I parked on the street and looked up at it for a long time. Then I drove to Mountain View Cemetery on the south side of town and found his grave. A flat granite marker flush with the ground. Francis James Voss, 1958, 2013. Beloved Father. I stood there in the wind and said the things I should have said when he was alive. That I was sorry. That he was right about the concrete. That I had been afraid of losing money and reputation, and I had chosen those things over a man's livelihood and dignity. That his children had become what they became partly because of what I had taken from him. That I couldn't undo any of it. But I could stop pretending it hadn't happened. The wind blew across the cemetery and carried my words toward the mountains, and I stood there until my legs ached, and then I drove home. In June, I established the Frank Voss Foundation for Construction Ethics. I funded it with $1 million from the sale of the Cherry Creek house. The foundation's mission was simple: protect whistleblowers in the construction industry, fund independent building inspections in underserved communities, and provide financial support to families of workers harmed by contractor fraud. Ben Callahan handled the legal filings. Rosa Gutierrez joined the advisory board. Jake designed the foundation's website himself, working from the kitchen table in our Capitol Hill apartment, the same table where we drank coffee on his bad nights. The foundation's first grant went to a subcontractor in Greeley who had reported structural deficiencies in a school gymnasium and been fired for it. We paid his legal fees, funded an independent inspection that confirmed his findings, and the general contractor was fined $340,000 by the state. The subcontractor kept his license. His family kept their house. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was a start. Brooks Construction continued to operate under independent oversight. I stepped down as CEO in April and appointed my longtime project manager, David Herrera, to run the company. The firm was renamed Brooks & Voss Construction in July, a name that confused some people and angered others. But it was the only name that felt true. You don't get to build something honest on top of a lie. You have to dig down to the foundation and start again. On a Saturday afternoon in August, I sat alone in the apartment, reading Megan's journal for the 3rd time. I had read it so many times that the pages were beginning to soften at the edges, the leather cover warm and familiar in my hands. I turned to the last entry, November 8th, 2019. Stop carrying the wall, Nathan. Put it down. I closed the journal and held it against my chest the way I had in Ben's kitchen on the day I first read those words. Outside, the sun was high and bright over Denver, and through the open window, I could hear the sound of someone playing guitar on a balcony below, and traffic moving along Colfax, and the distant bark of a dog in Cheeseman Park. Ordinary sounds. The sounds of a city going about its life. The sounds of a world that doesn't stop turning because one man made a terrible mistake and spent 20 years pretending he hadn't. I set the journal on the kitchen table. Beside it was a framed photograph Jake had placed there the day we moved in. Megan, Jake, and me at Trail Ridge Road in Rocky Mountain National Park. Summer of 2011. Jake was 13. Megan was laughing. I was squinting into the sun with my arm around her shoulders, and behind us the mountains stretched out in every direction, white-capped and endless. I looked at that photograph and I understood, finally, what Megan had been trying to tell me. The debt wasn't something I could pay off with money or confessions or foundations named after the man I had wronged. The debt was simpler than that, and harder than that. It was the debt of living honestly in a world I had spent decades lying to. It was the debt of being present fully, painfully present for the people who remained. For Jake. For Ben and Margaret. For the workers and families who depended on a construction company that now carried two names instead of one. The builder's debt is not a punishment. It is a promise. A promise to build differently. To build with materials that hold. To build on ground that has been tested. To build walls that protect instead of conceal. My name is Nathan Allen Brooks. I am 56 years old. I live in a small apartment in Denver, Colorado, with my son, who survived something no person should ever have to survive. I run a foundation named after a man I destroyed, and every morning I wake up and try to build something that matters. Not because I deserve forgiveness, but because Megan gave it to me anyway, and that is a foundation you don't waste. If this story moved you, leave a comment below telling me, what would you have done in Nathan's place? Would you have confessed everything, or would you have let the past stay buried? Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. And if someone you know needs to hear this, share it. Sometimes the stories that change us are the ones we almost didn't hear.